Hi now, welcome back to Hi, my name is Alex. As always, I am doing this tournament of myself, my one and only me, 2-month challenge to be able to produce 3 videos every week and to do this form of content because it's kind of booming right now in 2025 and see if I can pull this off as well. If I can do this, and so can you. And now I'm sharing my stories again, continuing off from my last episode, which I talk about how I became an AV events coordinator, but at this stage, how I became an AV technician. And you'll find it quite interesting. If not, no big deal. So continuing from my last episode, like I said, when I got into AV, to become an AV technician, I got into the most awkward position when I was at Credit Suisse. And it was truly from that point that I actually got into it because my background at the time was an expert in Lotus Notes and teaching and educating people on that platform, which was already dying out at that time, and it was moving into new directions. I think there are people still using it, but I don't know. I haven't used it for a while now, but I kind of moved out using Outlook now and moving on to other things. Now, it's quite noisy at the moment in the workplace here, from construction and people talking in general. So I do apologize if it's louder than me speaking through. This is the only space I have right now to talk and share my stories. So moving on to the next step, what happened, I was in a situation where I became an AV technician almost overnight with no experience, with no skills, and I had less than 5 days to learn from the previous AV technician of how he managed the building for this AV side of things. Even though everything was running on Cisco and Tamberg units, it was already getting outdated. It was already past its prime, and this AV gear was kind of breaking down, surviving only on the sole purpose on sticks and stones and sticky tape and bubble gum. That's probably the best way I can describe it, and that's what I said on the last episode. It truly was how it was holding together. And I'll tell you this right now, when I was in there, they had broken systems and things were not organized properly. It was an international-based company, so we also had to deal with different times of the night and meet those hours, based in New York, Hong Kong, Singapore, you name it, we did it. We were talking because Credit Suisse is global. It's a global company, right? It's a Swiss bank, and the things that we deal with on an everyday basis was challenging because the plan and the idea for the AV events team at the time, and I was kind of the one leading it now. All suddenly, I had to build plans in place and fix up its problems that it had there, which was years stuck like that, piled up in papers with just a bad rep. And I was sitting on the same floor as my manager and stuck in a point where I either do this or lose my job. Sink or swim. That was the position I was put into. Now, hopefully you guys are not put in the same situation, but this is what I was put into at the time. I had a small team of 2. Me and my other guy that was in there, and slowly it became 3. And basically I had to run these systems. Now, at first, when I was going like, hey, mate, look, I don't really know anything about AV. This is not my background. I never studied it. I don't know anything about this. But with my current situation, this is where I am and this is where we are. So I'll try to do this. And if I lose my job the next day or the day after that, then so be it. And so I learned very quickly how things worked. And he gave me a very, very rough edge way how things operate. And we also had a budget, a certain amount to have. So if something really failed and dropped and failed on us, there was so much backlash. Even though it was systems that were failing to them, eventually it's going to break down. And that's kind of what happened, but for another day. So when I was doing this, right, guys, and learning it, I had to change their systems in place because, first of all, we had a small budget of, I think, $3,000 for the year. We had $3,000 for the year, and that would have to pay off for any damages or broken gear and using what we had. So we were pitch patching a lot. I found a lot of times we were using stuff from one room and pulling that apart just to make sure another room can stick together to hold off long enough so then the groups that we hired out can fix the stuff with the budget that we're on. It was bad, guys, it was bad. And I found myself in these international calls and the contractual group that I was with at the time to have a plan down in place for my Sydney AV team to work this on. So now that we're a group of 3, we had a manager that would be willing to fire you on the spot, and I was in a position of running this small group to make sure the gear was running well. We had clients that were coming in and out of rooms and using the space, and luckily especially the first few weeks, it gave me enough time to sink my feet in to understand how things worked out. And so what I did to make sure the structure I built was there was 3 of us. We would cover, the start of the day, the middle of the day, and the end of the day. and rotation and make sure that we cover each other's feet to make sure what meetings were going on. So we kind of try to keep intact with the reception desk. And the lady on there, her name was Lonnie, and I don't care if I'm naming her out. She was a nasty, nasty, mean old lady. She really was, and she gave us hell. If we were late even for a few minutes, our manager was informed. If something was wrong, even for an instant, she would complain about it. She had nothing better to do but to complain. Yeah, I'm going to voice her out here right now. All she did was complain more times than anything else. And she even had people in her own team fired just solely because she didn't like them. She's just how she was. And I know she was underpaid. I know that for sure. And she just, I don't know, she was just an angry, aggro old lady. It's just how she was. And she gave us a lot of grief when we worked, when all we wanted to do was just have peace with them, because at the end of the day, we had to see each other every day. We had to work with them, right? And so they complained. And so the clients that we're dealing with, sometimes it was face-to-face meetings through the AV gear equipment, the Tamberg and Cisco units that was there. But it was during the big events that were the biggest problems, because sometimes the mics would fail and they'll drop, and we didn't have anything spare to use, and we had to make that work. How do you make something that work that is failed because it's inbuilt to the system? The answer was it didn't work. So we kind of, luckily, because these big rooms, we had the lectern, and we kind of threw everyone over there. So that sort of worked. But when that went down, we were working with our Singapore engineer that was international to work it out remotely to get it working. And sometimes it worked out and other times it didn't. So we always had to jump back and forth. One of the biggest things that we had there, we had a trade floor, and this is most banks have their own trade floor. There was an area down there that kind of hyper-focused on making good deals over the trade market, right? And this had to work every day without fail nonstop. And for those who do know, in the banking world, the trade floor is one of the main floors that really generate income and the main income source for the banks. And it has to work 24/7. Their systems could not fail. Their units had to work. It had to be flawless. So this particular AV room had the tendency of sometimes playing up. And sometimes my guys weren't there, and I was stuck with the run going, how to fix this out. And I would have a phone call at 4 in the morning or 5 in the morning going, what's going on here? Get it fixed. And I'm going, huh? I didn't even realize what was going on. So there were times where I had to pick up my phone. I came to work and I had like these biggest problems thrown in my face. And I go, like, I had to figure this out. So I would actually call out companies that was involved with the case. I would call Tamberg and Cisco directly. Luckily, I had direct calls to them and just call their service line and just figure it out. I would figure it out with the person on the phone and work it there. So if you never know what the job is, it's always about making the gear working, making things function right, and making it run with systematic systems in place that were not there. And luckily, I had means of approaching things just because of my approaching Lotus Notes at the time, learning that skill set, asset, and made an asset of myself. I was able to kind of build those same formats, being an AV technician and learning the skills. And what I did more than anything else is that calling the helplines, the service lines, was a big deal. That teaches you how things work. Talking to the technicians that come out to fix the gear, what they're doing, how their procedures, how does that work, taught me more skills. And just being involved directly with direct physical problems in me and working it out taught me the skills I needed. All this was taught for me through experience, through real-time experience, not doing a bachelor's degree or learning through TAFE. When I was learning this on the get-go because I was, sink or swim. That was the only situation they gave me, and the only thing I had in my hand. And luckily I was swimming. But it was it was the very first year I was down there was by far the hardest time I had at Credit Suisse. At the same time, I was seeing people getting fired left, right, and center, people being mistreated, people being abused verbally, treating less than people. And this was a very, very common thing. A lot of people were being treated less than people because we were contractors. So that we weren't of value to the company. We just felt like, oh yeah, here today and gone tomorrow. And that was the common theme I saw a lot. And that was the first time as a contractor I ever felt less as a person than I ever was when I was down there. But I stuck through it because the money was good. It was good for that time, and I was learning. Only to learn, and this is the part where I'm going to voice this out to you guys, only to learn that I was being underpaid for years, under the paid wage gap. Blech. that wage gap that I had, I was under that pay, and I deserved more, and I deserved better. And it took me years on the track to come down to that and understand that I was, because at that time it wasn't in my mind frame to think about that. I was more learning the skills. You know, I became a team leader, learning how systems work, how to deal with these problems. This is more the things I was more concerned about at the time. But I was being underpaid, and I was working 2 or 3 jobs. I was also being a waiter at the casino, the Star City Casino at the time, and my parents were down there, and they gave me that chance to work as a waiter down there. So I was doing 3 or 4 days down there at night while working the 9 to 5 during the day, working for weekends, working through days after work. I would take the train to, I took the train to the hub, to Town Hall, to Town Hall, and I would run. I physically ran from Town Hall to Harborside to the casino. And I made it all the time with a mate of mine that did the same job, that offered me the job as a facilitator at the time somewhere else. And I would run across, and that was what I did to make that money, because I had a small kid already. My wife wasn't working. She refused to work. She still doesn't want to work. And basically I had to make it work for me. Anyway, I'll keep it short for now, and I'll share more stories with you. Hopefully that was interesting, but that's kind of what happened to me when I was in Credit Suisse. And as always, if you happen to share the same news, reach out. I'd love to be on a Zoom call with you. You know, if you want to talk about other things, you know, do provide consultation and mentoring. You just reach out and we'll have a chat. And as always, you know, leave a like, subscribe, comment down below. It's you guys that help me continue this as I go and do this challenge for myself and making more videos. Besides that, anyway, as always, stick by me and stick by you. And thank you for watching. Hi, my name is Alex. I'll see you in the next episode now. Bye now.